Okay, I'm here with Elizabeth McQuade, who is blessing us from Canada, courtesy of Zoom software. Thank you, universe, for such inventions. And I'd be really, really grateful, Elizabeth, if you'd talk to people a little bit about how what you regard as intuition. You know, kind of
Yeah,
what is
sounds
it?
good. Yeah.
Very, in a very practical, down-to-earth ways, and some of the ways intuition works with people, because we think we're working with intuition, but actually it's working with us. Sometimes it sets the conditions. Look, I work best with you like this, and I work best with you like this. So don't try to be, Sophronia knows all, that sees all the spirits. Maybe I work with you this way.
Yeah.
So if you wouldn't mind, I'd really appreciate it, Elizabeth.
Sure. Yeah. So it's nice that you gave me heads up. You're like, I want to know what you think intuition is. So I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm going to look it up in the dictionary first, because, and it's funny. There's a couple different definitions, but the one that I really liked was, I'll read it. It's intuition is the ability to acquire knowledge without proof, evidence, or conscious reasoning, or without understanding how the knowledge was acquired. And I think that's a really good. It's like this. You just know. And I asked my 9-year-old daughter, I said, well, what do you think intuition is? Because I just thought it'd be nice to get a younger person's version. And I was quite impressed with her. She said, intuition is something you can always rely on, lean back on. You can ask for a solution to a problem. It is something you can trust when you need answers. And I thought, oh, so that's pretty good. I don't know if I had that definition at 9. And then I was thinking about different types of intuition, and this might demystify what intuition is, because I think we all of us are gifted with intuition. Every animal is gifted with intuition, and even plants. And there's been experiments where plants have intuition as well. But there's one of the first more basic intuitions that I thought of is that intuition. Say you're walking through a crowd, and your body just turns and you see someone staring at you. That's your body's intuition. And that's, and they even say to spies or, people or private investigators, they tell them if they're following someone not to stare at them, because there's that reaction, that physical body reaction. The person will turn around and they'll be made. So it's a well-known thing, I guess, in intelligence communities. But, like if you think about, like, if you've ever been sitting at a table and something goes to drop and your hand goes out and reaches it and you grab it before it falls, that's your body. And it's not going through your mind, it's actually going through your Wei Qi energy. And the Wei Qi in traditional Chinese medicine is the energy level, the first level of your aura, which is just above, within, and below your skin. And so a lovely story, which I would like to share. My brother-in-law told me this story. He had a friend who was out in nature, and from work, and way up in Canada, nobody around, but had a shotgun with him for obvious reasons, because there's some large animals. And he kept feeling like someone was watching him, and he was looking around, he couldn't see anything. And of course he knew there was no people there, and he just kept going. And all of a sudden he instantly turned, fired a shotgun as he turned, and he killed a cougar who was mid-jump, ready to get him on the back of the head. So that was, and he didn't even think about it. It was just his body did the work. And he actually, the forest ranger, was trying to say, you were poaching. He says, no, honestly, I just turned around and I just shot my shotgun. So that's a really kind of a very, very drastic example of our bodies, right, to use intuition to preserve it.
Also sometimes that creepy feeling where you just want to avoid someone, and you don't even know who it is, but you feel something isn't right with a crowd or something, and you move on. And it's not like you saw them, or even it's just doesn't feel good. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But then there's other types of intuitions, like there's that gut feeling, like you're saying, like the gut feeling similar to the body one, but it's in your gut, and you're like, Or there's sometimes a heart one. You can feel sometimes an intuition in your heart.
We'll talk about the gut for a minute. Talk about the gut for a minute, and then talk about the gut for a minute. Would you mind?
Yeah, sure. Well, the gut, it's kind of like that summer thing, like where you get a gut feeling like, I shouldn't go to that party or event, or I don't want to go out with that person. And I bet everybody who's listening to the video has had a gut feeling like, oh, I don't think I want to do that. It doesn't feel right. And if you go and do it, then you're kicking yourself usually 9 times out of 10. You're like, I knew I shouldn't have gone to that thing, and then I, got the flu, or I had to deal with this thing that I didn't want to deal with, like that. You generally,
Yeah, and
yeah,
also, if you don't mind my saying, a lot of times we have, since you talked about intuition as there's no rational reason for it. It's
no,
just knowledge. It doesn't come, you don't have your evidence. So as many good girls do, well, I promised my friend I would do it, or, ooh, they might think I'm lazy if I'm not doing this, or, oh, well, it must, if it's all right with everyone else, it must be all right with me. Or, so we're socialized often to have reasons to override that gut feeling.
yes,
And especially since we don't often know why we have the gut feeling,
yes.
but
There's
we
no logical.
have it. And I think that's also important, because sometimes people say, well, if I don't know why I feel it, I'm not going to act on it.
Or how
But
can
you
I
may
justify it?
never know why. Your gut is smarter.
Yes,
So,
yes.
yes.
And it's, and it is a brain. It's considered a brain in some
Yeah.
modalities. It's got more neuropeptides, which are a communication molecule in your gut than in your brain. So, and it's probably more ancient in some ways, that
It
kind
is.
of instinct. Yeah, and I think that's the thing too. I think women or people in general have to give themselves permission to say no, and give no reason whatsoever other than I don't feel that it's the best for me, or something feels off. So that if you need permission to say no, take it from us. You have permission to say no if you feel something's off. And then the heart one, I'm trying to think of an example for that one, but sometimes your heart's not in something, whether it's a relationship or a field of study, and you can't, no matter how hard you try to love that person the way they need to be loved, or love that career the way it needs to be done, you can't. Your heart can only take you so far, and it's your heart saying, I can't go any further. It physically won't let you go any further. And generally, eventually, after a lot of mulling over and probably lots of letter writing and upsetness, usually the heart involves a lot more emotion. People cave in and go, okay, my heart is telling me the truth. And then they give up, or they lose something. But in the end, generally, it's for the best, because then they meet something. They will probably meet that better person later, or that have that better career later. It might not always be easy to go with, especially the heart. It might not always be this easiest path to listen to the heart, but you generally don't even have a choice. It's just a matter of time, I find, in those situations. It's not a matter of will your heart lead and win that battle. It's more of when will you finally acquiesce to your heart's wishes.
Well, I mean, I've got to say some people never do. And I got to say that's also the good girl. I mean, there's good boy syndromes too. But it's just, well, I've been in so long and everyone would be disappointed. And also I can't give a really good reason, So I think many people do stay stuck because duty or,
well, and sometimes,
but your encouragement of people to say, no, this is intuition. This is real. This is not you chickening out. This is an important voice that comes deep within you and is part of your vital connections.
Yes.
And just pay attention to it and honor it as something positive and not as the dropout.
Yes. Yeah.
Really important, because as you said, intuition is something that you can't necessarily, it's only after the fact sometimes that you can get all the evidence for it. Yes, he was a cheater.
Yeah. Yes. Or yeah.
For me. Or wow,
And if you do, I think, and sometimes when you see heart problems with people in their later years, it's not always just due to poor diet. It might just be because every day their heart's please choose something different, and they're like, no. And then it can be an energetic illness, if that makes sense, just from that battle. Yes. So the remedy is always to choose love, and choose your highest path. And it's not always the easiest route, and it's not always the most socially acceptable or accepted by your family route. But in the end, it is about your soul's journey, and your heart is I'd say one of the spots in your body that's most connected to what your soul is wanting for your experience in this lifetime. And then moving to the head, that's one's a little easier actually sometimes to explain. That's the one where people you might get like insights, or you see stuff, or you get this kind of clear cognizance, this clear knowing, or you hear things. I think you may be surprised how many people have heard something. They'll be like, I heard my voice said, but there's no one in the room. Or, or people might get an image of something, or they'll have a dream of a loved one who's passed. That's real. But if you can't kind of prove it, doesn't mean it didn't happen. It happened. It happened in your synopsis, your brain. And I often sometimes will say to people, because I remember when it happened to me, I noticed a subtle shift from sometimes when I was receiving information, I was like, this isn't coming from my imagination. It's coming from it's almost like a different energy. And I really remember the day when I realized this was totally different than me. It wasn't my thoughts. Mm-hmm. But it was pleasant. It was nice. It wasn't, if you're getting odd thoughts, you want to, maybe look into other things. But it was just some really lovely info. And I was like, whoa, that's not mine.
That's right.
So yeah, that might help with those other intuition and other types of intuitions.
Sometimes you feel something about a person that you've just met, but there's no reason why you should know that. Mm-hmm. Or a lot of people say to me, well, I'm not clairaudient. That is, I don't hear things. I never hear things. And I said, well, that's okay. And then later they'll be talking about something and they'll say, yeah, I just felt, don't go there. And I said, well, did you feel it, or did it sound like the words came to you within you? And yeah, I said, don't go. And I said, well, that's clairaudience.
Yeah. Well, I think people think that
standing outside talking to you, you get some words and you go, well, I didn't know that, so thank you.
Well, I think people mistake that they're going to have to see it, like they physically see stuff, or hear it, like they're physically hearing someone speak irregularly. It's more subtle. That's why they're called subtle senses. So it'll be like you felt that, you felt and heard. Or it might be two senses at once, like you might feel and hear or feel and see. That happens for me. I feel and see at the same time. And it's subtle, but it's valid.
And it's often very quick.
Yeah,
and so
very fast.
Think that unless they're connecting with some spirit guide named Magog who is dictating to them.
Well, hopefully not that one. Yeah.
You never know. It's not that inner hearing, but it is, and it's often very brief and very simple.
Yes. Yeah, and quick. So it's almost like, and there's nothing left afterwards other than your remembrance of it, and you have to go, oh. So then you have to decide if you're going to heed that or not. And oftentimes by not heeding it, that's when you get the evidence. And by heeding it, sometimes you don't have any evidence. You're just like, oh, I hope that went okay. Yeah. So, it's quite an interesting, it's interesting. I was thinking about different experiences I've had over the years where, I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, for instance, once I was pushed to go get a newspaper. Oh, it's a long story. I don't know if I'll get to this one, but by going to get the newspaper, it confirmed to me something that happened the day before. But I was refusing to get a newspaper because my roommate was getting 4 or 5 newspapers a day at the time because she was in PR for this company. So I'm like, I'm not buying a newspaper. I've got free ones at home. But I went and read the headline. I was like, oh, and it confirmed to me something that had happened the day before. So that, I'm glad I listened, because I might have forgotten if I'd gone home and.
And if you don't mind, there's one thing I might mention and see how it strikes you, Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. And that is sort of the question of lead time. And that is, sometimes we get things are like little breadcrumbs. You get something dropped in and something dropped in and something dropped in. Maybe you'll do a little angel card reading in the morning and you get a few things but it doesn't make a picture. It doesn't make a plan. It doesn't make a big thing. But slowly over time, it just starts building. Yes. And then the pieces come together and your experience comes together. Yes. And again, I feel sometimes people get quite frustrated because if they go to a professional, it's usually kind of a nice download for them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But in real life, you often get a tidbit and you get a tidbit, and then there's some lead time where it develops or life shows you, and you just have to realize that is the intuitive process. It's not like, the golden tablets come down and you
Yeah.
read them all at once and it gives you the whole story for anybody.
Yes.
For
Yes. Well,
anybody.
and that's exactly it. Yeah. 'Cause if you got it all at once, you'd be 99 and ready for ready for the next phase of the journey. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think
Yeah.
people, we do expect a lot of immediacy and totality, but intuition doesn't always work that way. It'd be nice if it did. I must admit, some days I'm thinking, oh, I'd love to just have it all, but but then again, I think with practice and with when you take time to meditate, you take time to be in nature, you take time to breathe and drink lots of water, you're more likely, or your physical vehicle's in a better state where you can get bigger chunks of the picture or longer parts of the download, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, I think it does. And I'm also just looking at the idea that people often fault themselves that think they don't have very good intuition.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No,
When they get
I think actually
breadcrumbs.
everybody
Because
has
in my
intuition.
life, I get a lot of breadcrumbs. And even when people ask me things and I give them something that I hear for them or feel for them, and then it might be a day or two later, I get a bunch of other stuff. And I say, oh,
Yes.
that why. So the idea of not faulting oneself and saying, obviously I only have a rather low grade intuition. If it doesn't unfold, I don't want people to think that, because that's the way it works for me.
Yes, exactly. I'm just going to pause for 1 second.
Okay, thank you so much, Elizabeth. I'm wondering if you'd let me just comment on the importance of a few things that I heard you say. And one is the importance of really taking care of ourselves and taking time for ourselves, which of course can be a challenge for many people to find that. And it is interesting that the crones of the ancient world and in a lot of indigenous cultures are older women.
Hmm.
And not simply, I think, because older makes wiser. I'm older and it doesn't necessarily make wiser, but because they don't have all those childcare responsibilities and other responsibilities and other things that, are attention getting, and they actually have little time. So even though we're not old, many people, we can take that wisdom time. So you mentioned, walking, you mentioned being in nature, you mentioned staying hydrated, adequately nourished,
Yeah.
our bodies are feeling pretty good, doing things we just enjoy. And in between the workshops, people are doing angel card readings or other card readings and little exercises with each other. And sometimes people feel pressured by that. You can understand that. It's like, oh, I've got to produce something. And of
Yeah.
course, we're doing that to just keep the juices flowing. But there's a wonderful story, and your talk reminded me of this, of British science. And they said all of British science, all of the people, they've had so many great discoveries, and they attribute it to the 3 B's: the bed, the bath, and the bar. And that is what these great scientists, the Nobel Prize winners, to say, actually, when they get their best ideas is when they're in bed relaxing, wake up in the morning with these, the brilliant ideas that like totally
Yeah.
did it.
Yeah.
The bath for them, and the bar, chatting with friends. So the analogy for intuition is people may discount what they get just when they're relaxed and when they're themselves and when they're enjoying.
Yes.
And it's not all work
No,
and
and
pressure,
yeah.
passing into exams.
Yeah, and you hear about, different people that you're trying to solve a problem and then you let it go. And then and then it comes to you later that day or a couple days later when you're not even thinking about it. So there's no set time. You can't say intuition, do it now. And sometimes it can perform now, but sometimes it's about a process of release. Yeah. And trust. Yeah. And flow. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so very much, Elizabeth. It's been
Oh,
absolutely wonderful.
my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you very much for asking. I'm very honored. This was very enjoyable. Thanks, Anne. It's always good to see you.
Always wonderful. Yes.
Great. Okay. Well, all the best. And I wish you and your class, your workshops, all the very best on your intuitive journeys.
Yay.
Okay. Bye.